I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'd like to talk about the engagement of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They just announced around November 27th that they are engaged and the wedding will be planned next May of 2018. So let's talk a little bit about their charts and first of all about who they are. Prince Harry, of course, everyone has a soft place in their heart for Prince Harry. He's never been one to follow tradition. He's always going to do things his way, a little bit of a rebel. And his choice in marriage partners does pretty much bring this to focus because his bride-to-be is, first of all, an actress, and second of all, a foreigner. She is an American actress, and on top of that, she's been divorced before. This is not normally the traditional path that somebody of royalty takes when they're choosing a marriage partner. But after all, it's Prince Harry, so everyone thinks it's great, it's okay, because that's kind of what we expect of him. Now, talking about his wife-to-be, she's been in some series, and one of the dramas that she was in was called Suits for 7 Seasons. She played Rachel Zane, and I must say she's had quite the experience as an actress. So let's go ahead and look and see what we can tell from overlaying both charts to see how they compare and relate, and then we're going to look at where the trends of the future are going to take them according to the astrological cycles. So let's put up Prince Harry's chart first of all. Prince Harry, his chart, he was born September 15th, 1984. And the time of birth was 4:12 p.m. in London, England. And with that, Prince Harry's ascendant is Sagittarius, with Jupiter in the first house in Sagittarius. And I might say Jupiter is pretty tightly conjunct Neptune. Very interesting. He is a very powerful, philosophical, and kind-hearted soul with Jupiter in the first with Neptune. And actually, this is what we call a Hamsa Yoga, when you have Jupiter in its own sign, or it can be exalted, in an angle. The angular houses are 1, 4, 7, or 10. And when you have a planet in an angle in its own sign, this makes this planet extraordinarily strong. It's who they are. So he's a humanitarian. He is the epitome of the philosopher, and he has his own beliefs and his own path in spirituality that he believes in and follows. He's a very, very interesting individual, especially with Neptune being next to Jupiter, makes him very spiritually minded. So moving on, let's talk about the synastry of these charts. So let's go ahead and let's put up Meghan's chart. Now, Meghan Markle was born August 4th, 1981, and the time of birth is 4:46 a.m. in Los Angeles. Now, interestingly enough, she is even older than him. So I think there's so many interesting things about their attraction, but overlaying the charts, let's talk about their synastry. Because I find it interesting that both of them have a Saturn moon. In other words, Saturn aspects the moon in both their charts. And you're going to find that in Meghan's, Saturn is conjunct the moon in Virgo, while Harry has Saturn oppose the moon in Aries and Libra. Saturn, by the way, is the planet that's in Libra, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Here he has a very, very powerful Saturn. And I always tell people, it's rare to have Saturn exalted. It's exalted for 2.5 years, but this is only every 30 years. And this is a powerful, powerful position for Saturn. And no doubt, Prince Harry is a strong character, deep and profound. So the fact that they both have a Saturn aspecting the moon represents that they both have deep feelings and very serious-minded, I might add. And on top of that, when I think about Saturn moons, sometimes they can be prone to bits of sadness and things that from the past will come up and affect their moods. And they can be on and off, go to moods of depression sometimes. This is how I've seen Saturn moon. So this inner sadness. But thinking about this, let's look at Harry's Venus. Harry has Venus. It is debilitated, I might add, in Virgo. And a debilitated Venus in Virgo can represent that there's difficulties in relationships, just by the fact that Venus in a man's chart does represent the wife. So it's interesting that it is debilitated. But placing Venus into Meghan's chart is where the interesting part arises, because Harry's Venus lands on her moon Saturn, and on top of that Jupiter. She was born under the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Happens once every 20 years. So this conjunction, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, is where Harry's Venus sits. And what does that mean? Well, Venus is love and relationships. They have a lot in common, especially because it is Meghan's moon. And Virgo can be very detailed oriented, scrutinizing, critical. And with Harry's Venus being right there on her moon, they have a lot in common, the way they look at things, the way they feel about things, and especially in the area of relationships, because Venus is all about relationships. So this can really connect them. And this is a benefic, but you know, Venus being tight with Harry's Saturn, I mean Meghan's Saturn, Harry's Venus on Meghan's Saturn can make relationships last. This is a good indicator. Believe it or not, you have to have Saturn contacts for a relationship to last, because Saturn will go for the duration. Saturn makes for lasting relationships. So this is very interesting. And the fact that Harry's Venus, it is in the 10th house. The 10th house is the house that deals with career, social standing, how you appear to the world. And the fact that Meghan's planets in Virgo, moon particularly, land on his Venus, make them extremely public figures. These two will be in the limelight more than you know. So, going forward, another thing is to look at the fact that this Venus, Moon, and Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, all of these coming together, and this is in Harry's 10th house. What you do is you overlay one person's planets and place them, transpose them on the other chart. And whatever house they land in will give you the reference of what the relationship's dealing with. And this is their public image. But most of all, I think that the Jupiter-Saturn, her Jupiter-Saturn landing in his 10th, represents that they're going to have a lot of involvement in humanitarian efforts. And they like talking about the creative arts. And will probably do a lot to promote this. And going to Meghan's chart, she is an artist. For going to her chart, she has Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto in Virgo in her 3rd house. So it is natally in her 3rd house. And what that means is she's a creative artist. The 3rd house is self-expression. It's the arts. And actually, it's entertainment. Entertainers have very, very strong third houses. And the fifth house is usually a house that deals with entertainment as well. These are the two houses of creativity, 3 and 5. And in actuality, you know, the fifth house is the third house from the third house. This is why it is also a house of creative arts and self-expression. Another thing that makes for Meghan to be extremely, extremely creative and expressive is her natal Venus, which is in Leo, and it is in the nakshatra Purva Falguni. And Purva Falguni is the nakshatra of the entertainer, the performer, the need to express themselves. So she has it in her second house, which means she is extremely vocal and she has a strong, powerful voice. And she knows what to say and how to say it. Venus in the second house. Remember, the second house is our voice. Additionally, Venus in her chart rules the 11th house and is in the second house. This is one of the strongest things that constitute wealth and money in a chart, because the 11th house is the house of great gains. And whenever there's a connection between the 11th house and the second house, it means the person will come into wealth and money. So her Venus, ruler of the 11th house, resides in the second house of money. So obviously she will do extremely well and have the experience of wealth and prosperity throughout her life. Okay, so then I'm looking at putting the planets. Harry's Venus, which is in Virgo, lands in Meghan's third house, transposing his Venus back to where her moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto are. And that represents that he is very proud of her talent and her acting ability and who she is and what she does. And that he will allow to be who she is in the area of self-expression. So looking at, going back to Meghan's chart, she has Rahu in the first house. And I've often said those that have Rahu in the first house will experience a life that is of fate and destiny, because this means that no matter what they plan, the universe has a divine plan. And they may make certain plans to go a certain direction, but their plans will change when they least expect it, because Rahu has a plan. Rahu will pick them up and place them where they're meant to be. So someone that marries into a royal family definitely has a certain fate and destiny outlined for them that they may not have particularly planned. So this is a very interesting aspect. But you know, when Rahu's in the first house, this means Ketu's in the seventh house. And that's not the best scenario for relationships. When you have Ketu in the seventh house, it represents the marriage partner. And Ketu can represent problems and difficulties, and that the partner is not easy to get along with. And you know what? Many times when I've seen Ketu in the seventh house, it represents that the partner has light-colored eyes or something special about their eyes. The light that emits comes out of the eyes, but consequently, they may have light-colored eyes, which Harry does. But remember, Meghan is a divorcee. So this Ketu represents her first failed marriage. And on top of that, if she hasn't learned what she came here to learn through marriage and relationships, based on the fact that that's what Ketu in the seventh house means, then she's got to learn these lessons in this life. So hopefully, the first go-rounds taught her what she needs so that the second round will not be a repeat. But Ketu in the seventh is not the easiest combination for somebody in marriage. So The next variable that I want to look at in terms of marriage and relationships is Mars, because there's something called Kuja dosha. And Kuja dosha means when Mars aspects the 7th house. And looking at both of their charts, Mars aspects the 7th house in both of their charts. Actually, both of them have Mars aspecting the 7th house by its 8th full aspect. Mars aspects in Vedic astrology and Parashara aspects are that Mars full 100% in power aspect is the conjunction, the opposition, 4 placements from where Mars is, so in other words, a forward square, or 8 placements counting from where Mars is. That's where Mars delivers its full-bodied 100% in power aspect. So if you look at both their charts, Mars, counting from Mars is its placement casting its aspect to the 7th house by its 8th aspect in both charts. So they both have Kuja dosha. What is Kuja dosha? Kuja dosha is when Mars aspects the 7th house, either being in it, opposed it, or aspecting it by 4 houses away or 7 houses away. You always count the Vedic aspects moving forward in the chart. And these charts in the South Indian style, always the planets are moving clockwise. So this is where you see this aspect. But Kuja dosha means it's very difficult for marriage for the person when Mars aspects the 7th. But the remedy to cure it is when both people have Kuja dosha, it's supposed to mitigate the aspect of Mars to the 7th. So this is a good thing that they both have Kuja dosha. So moving on, we're going to look at how Meghan's Venus, which is in Leo, how it connects to Harry's chart. So when we transpose her Venus into Harry's chart, what we find is it's going to conjunct Harry's natal Sun and Mercury in his 9th house. This is nice because the 9th house is about spirituality, truth, and travel. They will travel the world and they will do many things together to connect their philosophies, their purpose, and humanitarian efforts. So this is really, really nice that her Venus sits on his Sun and Mercury. And it does connect with his 9th house. And his Sun and Mercury, if you transpose that back onto her chart, will land in her 2nd house, which means he's going to make her a very wealthy person. That's what that means. So, but the Mercury-Venus combination is beautiful. They will have, connection through conversation. They love communicating together. They love speaking together. They love the way each other think. So that's a great connection. But when I look at Harry's Mars and K2 and Uranus in his 12th house, this is really, really a tough aspect. And I know, we all know the tragedy that he went through, because when you see this in the 12th house is hidden fears. And it also represents sleep. So he wakes up a lot. He has nightmares. Probably the most devastating event of his life, the terrifying loss of his mother through the tragic accident, really affected him and will affect him throughout life with this Mars and K2 together. And really, when you think about that together in his 12th house, this is also, if you count from where his natal moon is, if you look at his chart from Chandra Lagna, from the moon being the ascendant, The Mars K2 Uranus, which represents sudden accidents and tragedy, goes to the 8th house from the moon, and this does explain the horrendous loss of his mother. And it is in his subconscious, it is in his mind, and it does affect him for the rest of his life. And what I could say is it disturbs so many things, but this is all about hidden fears. And I think his Mars, being ruler of the 5th house of children, in the 12th house with Uranus and with K2, that he is fearful of having children. That's one thing I will say. So this is very difficult. And looking at Meghan, Meghan also has Mars. Look at that. Meghan has Mars as well in her 12th house. And you know, the 12th house is said to be hidden enemies. So they both have Mars in the 12th, and they are fearful because people are always probably hunting them down, especially as celebrities. So this may really come to a very difficult time in their life when they feel like they have no freedom because they're constantly going to be hunted down by the media, by the paparazzi, and probably Harry has a fear that the same thing could happen to him as his mother. But he is very mystical and very spiritual, with Neptune being right next to his Jupiter, especially in the 1st house. He's a mystic. He believes in things beyond this world. And he's a very, very spiritual person. So going forward, let's talk a little bit, now that we kind of have a sense and a feeling of who they are, what they're about, but let's look at what I foresee happening down the road in their charts. Because this summer, this May through November, Mars and K2 will come together, transiting that is, in the sign of Capricorn. Mars will be exalted, and with K2, it's going to be very, very intense. And the fact that they chose May as the time of the wedding is a little concerning. And because throughout the summer months, what's going to be activating both of their charts are these eclipses. And take note that for Meghan, the Mars and K2 will be in her 7th house. This is not a good sign for marriage. And on top of that, her Rahu is 8 degrees of Cancer. Her K2 is 8 degrees of Capricorn. And Rahu and K2 are returning to their natal positions. She's got what we call a nodal return. But note that her Mercury is exactly 11 degrees of Cancer, and her K2 at 8 degrees of Cancer. This is going to be in alignment with the lunar eclipse around July 27th, when K2, Moon, and Mars will all be within a degree, where with the Moon, the lunar eclipse, so Moon will be around 9 degrees of Capricorn, conjunct the Mars and K2. So K2, Mars, and the Moon all together, they will be in alignment within a degree of each other, right on Meghan's K2 in her 7th house of marriage. This is not a good thing I'm seeing. And the fact that they are aspecting her Sun and her Mercury and Rahu in the 1st house, there's going to be some trouble. Feelings will change. Something will occur. And not only that, notice where Meghan's Venus is. It's at 19 degrees of Leo. And Neptune is going to be opposing her Venus throughout the year, on and off. And I always say that when Neptune conjoins different planets, it's like a spell's been cast over you. Neptune is illusion, it's deception, and it's confusion. And when it starts to aspect a planet, particularly a planet like Venus that rules relationships, you have to be careful. You're like you're under a spell. And I'm sure coming into this fame and royal family is going to be as glamorous as it gets. There's going to be parties, there's going to be excitement, glamour, but the illusion. Once the Neptune transit wears off in about a year to a year and a half, so will the spell be lifted, and people have a definite change of heart. A lot is about to transpire concerning this marriage and relationship. So possibly because she's settling into this royal family, she thinks she can still act. She thinks she can go back to her old life and have her cake and eat it too. But as what happened to Prince Kelly, as she married into the royal family in Monaco, she could no longer act. Her life changed dramatically, as well as Meghan's will change more dramatically than she knows. Her life is getting ready to be on display because remember, so many people put you under the microscope and analyze everything you do. After a while, it's not a good thing. So looking at Harry's chart, talking about the transiting planets, transiting Saturn is now in Sagittarius in his first house, which means it is aspecting his 7th house. And right now, at the time of their engagement, Jupiter, being in Libra, is also trining his 7th house. Remember, the 7th house is the house of marriage and relationships. So whenever you have both Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn is opposing the 7th house, Jupiter is trining it. When you have these two planets simultaneously aspecting a house, it empowers that house for what it's good for. It is a point of manifestation, so it created this marriage. But once Jupiter moves into Scorpio next October of 2018, Jupiter will no longer be aspecting the marriage house. Only Saturn will. And by the time we have Ketu come into Sagittarius, which will be around March of 2019, Ketu will be in the first house, but Rahu will be in his 7th house. And this is where things are going to get difficult. And over the summer months, while we have that eclipse happening in her 7th house, a lot is transpiring. There can be some arguments, there can be some disagreements. Things are not going to be easy for this royal couple. But it never is for people of this position. They are always scrutinized, analyzed, and they have no freedom because they are hunted down by the paparazzi. So a life of fame may seem glorious, but it's very lonely. And many people who enter into a life of such fame and recognition, they don't like it after a while because their freedom is stolen from them. So I'm going to say that from this chart, they have a lot to contend with and deal with down the road based on where the planets are going to be transiting. But I have to just say this one thing. Obviously, the royal couple did not ask an astrologer for the timing for their marriage, because during the time that Mars comes into Capricorn, it will be in Meghan's 7th house. This is not a good timing for marriage. With the eclipses falling in Meghan's 7th house and Saturn aspecting Prince Harry's 7th house, this is not the most appropriate time astrologically for a wedding, they are going to be scrutinized. They are going to be stalked by the media, stalked by the paparazzi, and all of this plays heavy on people's lives and causes difficulty in terms of a relationship. So I just want to say I wish the very best for them and may them overcome the astrological difficulties that I see in their chart. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information about me, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. And if you would like a transcript of this analysis, you can go to my magazine, which is astrologicmagazine.com. And if you'd like to learn Vedic astrology, go to my university website, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.